Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a very specific and, let's be honest, kind of overwhelming anxiety that haunts pretty much every dedicated family historian. What exactly happens to decades of meticulous genealogy research when you're gone? It's a heavy thought, I know, but today we're going to transform that anxiety into an empowering, structured strategy that ensures your life's work actually survives for generations. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll look at the legacy dilemma, map out a distributed legacy plan, figure out exactly where your data belongs, set up a genealogical executor, build an action plan, and wrap up with why your work actually matters so much. All right, Section 1, the genealogy legacy dilemma. To frame this, we're looking at a fantastic case study from our source material about an 82-year-old researcher named Randy who has been at this for a whopping 38 years. 60. That's 60 linear feet of paper. Just picture that for a second, 60 feet of folders, binders, and stuffed file cabinets. Now, combine that massive physical footprint with 75,000 digital profiles across his software, thousands of digitized family photos, 500 ancestor sketches, and a genealogy blog with almost 20,000 posts. It's a literal lifetime of research. An absolute treasure trove, sure, but man, it's also a logistical nightmare. Which brings us to the million-dollar question. How on earth do you pass this on? Because the totally valid fear here is that public archives, they just don't want the raw, unorganized papers of everyday, non-famous people. And on top of that, your family members, even the ones who absolutely adore you, rarely have the time or the expertise to sift through 60 feet of paper while juggling their own busy lives. So what's the fix? That brings us to Section 2, the distributed legacy plan. And fixing this requires a complete 180 in how we think about archiving. This is a real game changer. The old school mindset is trying to find one single magical library or museum that'll just swoop in and take every single piece of paper and digital file you've ever hoarded. Spoiler alert, that institution almost never exists. Instead, the smartest strategy is distributed. You place different parts of your collection where they actually have the highest chance of surviving, and more importantly, being useful to future researchers. So the trick here is to chunk your massive lifelong collection into manageable categories. Think of it like 4 distinct buckets: your structured family tree data, your digital media like photos and home movies, your physical materials like those original binders, and finally, your intellectual work like your biographies and blog posts. Just by breaking it down like this, the whole shebang goes from totally overwhelming to highly manageable. Moving on to Section 3, where your data belongs. Let's look at some highly actionable solutions for each of those buckets we just talked about. Okay, so how do we map this out? For your structured data, the actual names, dates, and links, you absolutely need multiple backups of your software files, like RootsMagic or GDComs. And you should add trusted family members as collaborators on sites like Ancestry. But what about your written work and media? Your best bet here is the Internet Archive. It's free, it's public, and it's literally designed for long-term preservation of things like your family history PDFs and memoirs. For regional photos, skip the national level. Target local historical societies, like the ones in San Diego or Chula Vista, because they highly value community history. And finally, for those individual memories and source citations, throwing them on a collaborative tree like Family Search ensures your findings are actually there for future generations to stumble upon. Now, I want to pause here for a second on a very specific digital asset. If you're one of the many genealogists running a blog, and you've got thousands of posts documenting your journey, listen, this is a major historical resource. You need to export that entire site immediately. Please don't just trust the internet to keep it live. Save an HTML or PDF archive of your site and upload it to the Internet Archive. We do not want decades of your published process vanishing into thin air just because a hosting subscription expired. This contrast is absolutely vital for understanding how repositories actually operate. Archives will actively reject a giant mountain of unlabeled, unorganized paper. It's just way too expensive and time-consuming for their staff to process. But they are incredibly receptive to a well-organized digital archive that comes with a clear inventory spreadsheet. You've got to prioritize preservation over perfection. Get it organized digitally, slap some labels on it, and clearly state what the collection actually contains. Section 4, the genealogical executor. Now that we know where the data lives, we really need to talk about the human element, the bridge connecting your organized data to the future. Setting up a formal genealogical executor is one of those things that's almost always overlooked. Step 1, just designate a trusted person. Could be a grandchild, a cousin, or even a buddy from your local society. Next, you have to hand over the keys to the castle. Give them emergency access to your password manager and tell them exactly where those external hard drives are physically located. Finally, draft up a genealogical legacy instructions document. They need to know where the master tree is, which cloud accounts hold what needs to go to public repositories, and honestly, what is perfectly fine to just throw in the trash. All right, Section 5, your action plan. Theory is great and all, but to actually beat that feeling of overwhelm, we've broken down exactly what you need to do to turn this into a concrete plan. This timeline gives you a highly actionable strategy. We're pacing this out so you can start protecting your life's work right now without, completely burning out. It's a 3-phase approach. Secure the core data in month 1, preserve the digital media by month 3, and tackle that physical legacy by month 6. Let's break down the specifics.
So for the next 30 days, your priority 1 is strictly about securing that foundational data. Go ahead and create a fresh software backup and export a standard GenCom file. Next, back up your main computer genealogy folders to 2 separate external hard drives. Export your blog like we talked about. And finally, please don't overthink this one. Just write a simple 1-page summary titled What This Collection Contains so a normal lay person can actually wrap their head around your 38 years of work.
Okay, once the core is locked down, priority 2 hits at the 3-month mark. This is where we leverage the incredible power of the free, publicly accessible Internet Archive. This is where your written and digital media gets immortalized. Upload it all: the compiled memoirs, the hundreds of ancestor sketches saved as PDFs, the descendant reports tracing lineages, any AI-assisted biographies you've put together, and all those digitized home movies. Getting the stuff onto archive.org guarantees it remains searchable and accessible to researchers across the globe long after you're gone. And finally, priority 3 for the 6-month mark. This is where we face the physical realm. Put clear labels on whatever boxes remain, and hey, give yourself permission to let go. Toss out duplicate papers or those generic historical printouts if the core data is already digitized. Create a super simple inventory spreadsheet for the binders you do keep. But most importantly, share copies of your coolest digital files with interested heirs right now. Do it while you're still here to enjoy their reactions, answer their questions, and just experience the absolute joy of passing that history down. That brings us to our final section: why your work matters. We're going to wrap up this explainer by tackling a massive misconception that might actually be the very thing holding you back from starting this whole process. Look, so many genealogists suffer from a sort of imposter syndrome. They think that just because their ancestors weren't presidents or famous generals, their 60 feet of research somehow has no historic value. But here is the reality check. Historians rely heavily on the organized, documented evidence of everyday, ordinary families to truly understand the past. Your hundreds of sketches, those digitized photos, your proof arguments, they form an incredibly substantial, highly valuable historical record of how real people actually lived, migrated, and built communities over the centuries. The choice really is entirely in your hands. So ask yourself, will your family's stories be lost in 60 feet of dusty paper, or will they survive in a beautifully structured digital archive? Take a deep breath, designate your genealogical executor, start those local backups today, and keep uncovering those amazing family histories. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and happy researching!